Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our regular immigration update with Ian from the Westwood organisation, who I know now needs no introduction whatsoever. We're very grateful to you, Ian, and Helen's here with us as well for doing these updates for us, because I know it's such a complicated system and everybody is changing all the time. Before I hand over to Ian, I'll just let you know, can you post your questions for Ian into the Q&A at the bottom of your screens, and I will then go through those questions with Ian after he's finished his update. Ian, thanks so much for being here. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Tori, and welcome along, everybody. Now, although Tori is saying there that there's been lots of change and lots of updates, it's not been quite as active in this area of immigration as it has in other areas. So that's a little bit of a relief. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a regulated immigration advisor. My colleague Helen is on the call as well. Feel free to speak with her if you have any particular questions in the future. So I'm just going to take 15 to 20 minutes to go through just a few bits and pieces, and there's some slides that are coming up on the screen to cover some of these things. And then I'm going to throw it open to you guys for any questions that you might have. So whatever question you've got connected to immigration, I'm happy to at least try to answer it. And if I can't get an answer for you today, we will find out the answer and we'll feed it back after the event. So I hope the conference is going well for you. In terms of immigration and this very brief update, immigration continues to make headlines. Fortunately, as I mentioned, not too much with schools, with independent schools. A lot of the headlines are around shortages of workers and a number of migrants still coming across the channel in unsafe little boats. So we know this is still an important subject. We know we've got to be careful. We know that if we get this wrong, UKVI potentially will come down on us like a ton of bricks. So it needs that attention there. In terms of rule changes, not very much going on. There is one thing that I'll mention as we go through that you do need to be aware of, something that I've become aware of that schools have used as a bit of a get round, and I'm a bit nervous about it, I must admit. But in terms of the actual rules to sponsor students, very little has changed. So we're talking about those rules that were in place or introduced in December 2020, sorry, gosh, there's me going back in time, 2012, December 2020. They continue to bed down. There's been a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of changing and clarification where needed, but fundamentally we're still operating under that system. Of course, there was a big change for European students, and although the rules changed on the 1st of January, we didn't really see a big effect of that until the start of this academic year. So there are a lot of changes in the lead up to September. So I'm sure you will have had to change process, procedures, and for the first time, some of your European students may well have been needing to get visas. And that really did cause some headaches, and some that are still continuing, even though we're a couple of months on from term starting. So I've got a slide on that. We'll talk more about European students there. Processing times, they can continue to be an issue. If an application doesn't go through smoothly in the first instance, it takes time. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. And then this potential issue that I've mentioned about and how that might impact on your compliance. So hold on for that one. Just one other thing, I haven't got a slide on safeguarding, but UKVI's emphasis still is on safeguarding of the students, of course. Now, I know that is something that's paramount to all of you outside of immigration. So it's not something to be overly worried about. Just be aware that if there are issues, then immigration might go, oh, okay. That's the trigger that means that they will come and have a look at you in terms of an audit or something along those lines. Right, let's have a look at Europe first of all then. So students need to be sponsored now, but that's only true if they are a new student, if they've been a new student this year or obviously in the future. So any European student that held any kind of residency connection to the UK before the 31st of December last year potentially can claim that residency status, and that's called pre-settled or settled status. And those statuses can't be taken away. Well, sorry, they can be taken away, but it takes a long time to lose them. So you may have a student that's been in the UK, I don't know, let's say they were here for a couple of years, 5 years ago. They've been back in their home country and they're now seeking to come back. There may be that they can rely on that previous period of residency there. If someone is saying that they've applied for settled or pre-settled status, but they've not yet got it through, the deadline to apply was the 30th of June, but UKVI have been taking late applications. If someone can prove they've applied but are still waiting a decision, that is enough to give you comfort that that student's got the right to study. So you would need to see proof of that application, preferably something back from the Home Office to show that that's still in process. Now, if a student can't provide that residency connection, European student can't provide that residency connection, then they are going to need some other kind of visa. And in most cases, we're probably going to end up sponsoring that student. But don't forget, they could qualify for another type of visa if mum or dad are working over here, or if they've got some other connections. And just to give you one example, we were working with one particular school, and as I was asking questions about this young lad, transpired that he actually qualified for a British passport. He'd been born here and he'd spent the first 10 years of his life in the UK, then gone back to his home European country, but that was enough to qualify him for a British passport. So we use that as an alternative instead of having to think about some other visa category, sponsorship, or even whether we qualify for settled or pre-settled status. So European students are, from my experience with the schools we work with, causing a few headaches, or at least were towards the beginning of term. Sorry here, being a bit tongue-in-cheek, it's always the parents, isn't it? Now, being a parent myself, and my children have been through schools. In fact, I can see a representative from one of the schools that my children went to there. I can put my hand up and go, yep, as parents are a pain in the neck. So with the European students, I found that parents, trying to get their head around the fact that they've actually got to apply, and this takes time, and it might interrupt their fortnight in wherever they've gone on holiday, was a bit of a nightmare. And then when they actually got their act into gear and they started filling the application forms in, they didn't necessarily answer the questions correctly. So it has caused problems. Now, when a student is first coming in, when they're outside of the UK, there are a couple of ways that European students can apply. It's the same rules and they're going through the same process, but they have the option of using a mobile phone app and an online application form, or they have the opportunity to go to a visa application centre. If they use the mobile phone app, then they verify their identity over the phone, not over the phone, but with an app, and they will end up with a digital status, i.e. a share code and an online status. If they go to an identity appointment, they'll have their photograph taken by UKVI and they will end up with a BRP. But it's one or the other. A lot of schools seem to be confused, thinking, well, I've got the share code now, when's the BRP coming? It's not, it's one or the other. But with this online version of applying, we found that the text message you need to verify your identity doesn't come through to some countries, some European countries. So I've had text messages pinged to me at all times of the day or night as people are trying to use my phone to access the online application there. It's that lack of understanding of the process, the time it takes, recognizing or not recognizing that it can take 2 to 3 weeks for these to go through. So I left it too late. And even with the ones that I've done and been involved in, I've thought, oh, hang on a minute, where's the button to send in the supporting documentation? It's not the most intuitive of system, I have to say. And if you don't get it quite right, this is a little bit like not dotting the I's or crossing the T's, applications get bogged down with UKVI. So I'm aware of one particular situation where mum, bless her, did her best, but because she didn't do the right things at the right time, it kind of got slow, and then she contacted UKVI IT support, who did this, that, and the other, and whatever. And we're still waiting for the visa 8, 9, 10 weeks after her starting to get down with this. So when it goes wrong, it does seem to go spectacularly wrong. So I mentioned application timeframes there. So UKVI's published timeframes are that visas will be decided within 3 weeks of the application date if the person's applying outside of the UK. And this applies to all nationalities. It's not just Europeans. But if you apply in the UK, it's going to take 8 weeks, and perhaps even in reality, it's going to be a bit longer than that. So we've had a few students who came back under their old visa, started the term with a visa that was running out very, very soon. We've got the application in process, but we're now in jeopardy of them not being able to travel for Christmas because of those applications taking a bit of time. I've got my fingers crossed that we will get those through there. So in some cases, people have actually left the UK and made their application outside of the UK just so they can make sure that they're not stuck here over the Christmas period. It is possible to pay for expedited treatment as well, but generally speaking, it will be 3 weeks. And it's 3 weeks from your appointment, or 3 weeks from when you confirm your identity, if you're doing that on the phone, not necessarily 3 weeks from when you submit the application. So what we saw in September was, because people had missed the deadline or were still waiting for their visa to come through, they thought, okay, there's an alternative here. Let's use the short-term study route. So this, if you're not aware, is a visit visa that allows a student to study if they're just coming for a short period of time. And that's what I've got on this slide here. So the rules around this allow for a student to come for up to 6 months. They have to leave the UK at the end of their studies, at the end of their 6 months. But the idea behind this scheme is that term abroad. It's not there for ongoing study. So you could use it for a term or half term abroad, maybe even 2 terms abroad, if you can squeeze that into 2 lots of 6 months, really. Or it's a look-see, a trial session, or whatever else it might be. That's what this visa category is in place for. And it's something that people from around the world can use. You don't necessarily have to be a European citizen to use this. It just might mean that you have to apply for a visit visa if you come from a country where that will be suitable. Whereas your European students can get that visit visa to allow study when they arrive in the UK. So you can see why parents and schools thought this was a good workaround. Okay, we've not got our visa through, never mind, come into the UK, start your term. Once the visa is approved, maybe we'll get the BRP and we can hand it to you if it comes to school, or maybe you can travel out to the UK and back in and all of these kind of things. But this is where I think it gets risky. The whole premise behind getting a short-term study visa is that you're leaving at the end of that period of study. If a CAS has been issued, or if it's absolutely clear that this is a get-round, a workaround for a longer-term study, I think there's a compliance issue here. And I've certainly been advising the schools I work with not to use this scheme there. When UKVI look at this, and bearing in mind they could look at this after the event, after the students had that short-term study visa, they will be looking to see if they, and got inverted commas here, genuinely seeking entry to study as a short-term student. And if the intention is to issue a CAS, if the parents have paid a year's fees or signed a contract to say they're going to be there for the next 2 years of their A-levels or whatever it is, then it's very clear to me that that is not short-term study. So I'm alerting you to potential issues here. And then what if the visa is issued while the student's actually in the UK? Because one of the requirements, and this is a requirement that not a lot of people seem to be completely aware of, one of the compliance requirements is for you as a school to have proof of when the student entered the UK to start their sponsored study. So that they entered during the period of time they were allowed to, once their sponsored study visa had been issued. And of course, if you're receiving the BRP and handing it to them, then there won't be a relevant entry date for that. So hopefully that's not scared you too much. If you want to look into this a little bit more detail, I've looked at the caseworker guidance rather than the sponsor guidance. This is the guidance that the UKVI caseworkers run through. And they're looking to judge whether this is genuine study. So the highlighting here, the emphasis is my emphasis, but they're saying the student must have given a true account of how long they intend to study in the UK. They must genuinely intend to study a course that will be completed during their short-term stay. And then it goes on to say not to use frequent and successive periods of study as a means to live in the UK or circumvent the requirements of the charged student route. So if you didn't go down that route and didn't use the short-term student, sorry, I've laboured a bit of a point there, but if you did, yeah, be aware. The natural question is, what do we do? How can we help with this? And there's not a lot that can be done if it's happened now. So just an emphasis here as to what the short-term student route should be there. If you're getting indications from parents that they want to stay longer, don't use the short-term study route. It's appropriate to go to CAS as soon as you can and get a sponsored student. That's a bit of a warning there. And should UKVI come and audit, then they will look at your short-term records, short-term student records. In other news, though, the sponsored students, that seems to be going fine, apart from the fact that it is taking time to process these things. Other things that we've seen that are worth just being aware of, the safeguarding that I mentioned earlier on, and one of the compliance requirements for sponsored students is to have a parental consent letter. Now, the parents have to write that letter. They have to use it as part of the visa application. What I'm saying now is get hold of a copy of that letter. You've normally got parental consent on an acceptance form or your paperwork, but get hold of a copy of that parental consent letter. UKVI are expecting schools to hold that. With what we're looking at, what we've seen, finance refusals are still quite common, whereby the amount of money a parent is showing they've got doesn't match the outstanding fees that are mentioned on a CAS. European students and students from certain countries don't have to prove their finances. If UKVI deem they're coming from a country where education is affordable, they won't seek to get that information. But from a number of places, we see finance refusals that are still common. I've seen a couple of examples as well as where a school has received the funds, however many £1,000 it might be for that first term, and they've received it from lots of different sources. So you do, of course, I'm sure you will have to be mindful of the source of funds. Just make sure that there's no money laundering kind of issue. That's not connected with the immigration rules. It's just something I've seen a couple of recently, and I thought, okay, is this a pattern? 2 examples is too small to be able to come up with a pattern, but there we go. UKVI have said there is a new sponsor management system in the pipeline. The first time I heard that comment, though, was in 2010, and I'm still waiting. But we do know they're moving platforms. It's going on to the other thing. So I think we will see an updated system, and I just hope it's a little bit more user-friendly, help us in our sponsorship duties. My next recommendation is check your license is up to date. Next time you have the opportunity to log into your sponsor license, have a look at that license summary, make sure all the listed personnel are still relevant, take off anyone that's no longer needing access to the system, add in new people if they are. That's a good idea to do that. BRP delays. Now, in the UK, we are starting to get notification of people that are trying to collect their BRP. And this really applies to people that go to a post office to collect it, rather than if you're a collection location, as I recognise a lot of schools are. But we're seeing people get notification, they get an email from UKVI saying there are delays in the production of BRPs, don't try and collect it for 4 weeks. So it's just alerting you to the fact that that might be there. Now, BRPs are actually made on the same machinery or in the same location that driving licenses, UK driving licenses, are made. And over my cornflakes this morning, I saw that there are actually delays in the production of driving licenses as well. So I'm thinking there must be some kind of issue with the machinery or at the place that they're at the office that they're manufactured. I don't know what the issue is, but maybe there. And one thing not mentioned on the slide that I really ought to mention is the visa for people from Hong Kong. So if someone's from Hong Kong and holds the British National Overseas passport, or mum or dad hold that, then there is an alternative visa category. That is now fully up and running and in use for people that hold the British National Overseas or their dependents. And it's a much easier process than using the sponsorship route. So if you've got connections with Hong Kong, it's worth looking at that as an option. Now, this is not a sales pitch, but I do just want to say one thing about developments that we've got. We've been asked a lot, and we've been recognizing that there's not a lot of information out there and not a lot of training material out there. So we are busy working on an online training portfolio. And there's a URL there where you can go and have a look at what it's looking like at the moment. And we will be looking for some people to test this very soon, test that it's operating properly and that it's accurate and up to date. So if you're interested in that, do let me know. We would gladly give you access to that to have a bit of help, and hopefully you would learn something. I also, and Tori and I have had a brief conversation about this. We are also speaking with ANKIS as to how it might be available to ANKIS members. But that's all to come in the future, just so you're aware. More help and support is out there. So there we go, 20 minutes. I just about did that, as I said. Has anyone got any questions?
There's a couple here that we can kick off with, and then if anybody has got any questions, as you say, it has been quite a quiet time, so it might be that having had our update, they're just here for an update, and people are pretty happy with what they're doing. But anyway, why would you say the most common reason for a student visa to be refused? I know you've come up with some ideas now, but what do you think is the most common reason?
What we're seeing is that finance one that I mentioned earlier on, and that comes about because of the discrepancy. So when a school issues their certificate of acceptance for studies, their CAS, they will put on their mum or dad's paid a deposit. If that then changes, if more fees are paid and mum or dad don't have the balance left in an account, then the numbers don't add up, and UKVI will refuse, because the parents have basically got to say they've got the money for the first year. So either they've paid that all to the school and there's nothing outstanding, or they've paid a deposit and they've got to have the means for the rest. And I think a lot of parents, they don't realise that that's got to be sort of ready cash in an account kind of thing, rather than money that they'll earn and then be able to pay the fees with. So we're still seeing a lot of finance refusals.
Thank you. Just one other question. Do schools need to monitor non-sponsored international students?
Yeah, good question. Good question. So, of course, we've here really talked about sponsored students, but yes. So if you've got a student that's on a different kind of visa, maybe because mum or dad's working in the UK and you've got a student that's a dependent, they will have an expiry date to that visa. And that expiry date probably doesn't align neatly with the end of a term. So you need to make sure that the student has the right to study, which they do on that dependent visa. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is that mum or dad is extending their work visa and they're covering their dependents with that as well. So non-sponsored students, yeah, do keep a close eye on those.
Thank you. Another question here. Lost BRP cards. Any magical ideas for speeding up the process for UK-based applications? And if a student leaves the UK having lost their card, will they be refused entry on return?
Okay. Oh, wow. There's so much within that question. Thank you, whoever raised that question. So the problem is getting the replacement. You've got to report it lost. You've got to get the crime reference number or whatever they call it. and then put your application in for a replacement one. And my guess is that they will be at the bottom of the pile. So where a normal application is taking longer than it should do anyway, it does delay things. Now, the reality is, when they travel, it will depend on their nationality. And this is going to sound discriminatory. It's just the way the system works, unfortunately. When someone is boarding a plane or a train or whatever it is to come into the UK, the staff that operate that, the airline staff or similar, will check that people have got a right of entry. If you're British, European, American, Australian, whatever, you can come to the UK without a visa. They won't care. It's like, yeah, you've got an Australian passport, you're not going to be refused entry, or you've got a right of entry. If you come from a country where you need a visa, though, if you can't prove that visa, then it's likely that you will be denied boarding. So in theory, you shouldn't even get to the immigration control and therefore not be refused entry. However, if you did get to the immigration control, then particularly with youngsters, they will be given a period of temporary admission where UKVI looked into it. So what we would then have to do is just put some representations forward, show the applications in process, show we're waiting for it. But we're relying on the goodwill of the immigration staff at the airport to some extent.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer, Ian. Ian, as always, thank you so much for coming on and giving the update on every aspect. And thank you to Helen for being here as well. And thank you to all the delegates that have been listening in. As always, you have Ian's details there. Get in touch with him. And Ian, thank you very much. And we look forward to the next immigration update. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. See you all tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.